Hey, look at that. Hello. This is where I want to be. Welcome to another episode of ohmTown on Twitch. Basically a generic, all-inclusive news show that covers a small segment of news that gets aggregated at ohmTown.com. Funneled into 6 categories that you see here with me scrolling across the top. Create, news, education, entertainment, social, and technology. And I'm asking you to follow me here on Twitch. Go over to ohmTown.com, sign up, become a citizen, engage in conversation over there. When the shows are live, then obviously take part in the shows. But this is just a 1-hour show, and I'm slowly trying to ramp up to 50 shows a week. Not of just news. Each one of these that you see under the menu options, each one is a show. So if you are interested in a subject, you can either host or co-host. Just get in touch with me and we can talk about it. And if you have any questions or comments, obviously throw them into chat. That's why we're here. And I hope to see you throwing some questions in there. So what I do is I go over a little segment of the news, and maybe I can add some more context to it. But it's really about raising awareness and encouraging conversation about these various topics. And it runs really the whole gamut between create, news, education, entertainment, social, and technology. In my daily life, I merge business, technology, and society together, and I talk to people about it, either in the business strategic management context or in the it's the end of the world because my technology is failing me context, or in some other way, and when it comes to society. So there's a lot of news that is getting funneled into ohmTown.com and even more outside of it. And that's why I created ohmTown, to try and distill the massive onslaught of information down to something that's manageable for me. And because I shared that idea with other people, they thought it was a neat idea. And so I opened it up to the public. Yes, there are other sites that do something similar. But I'm hoping that you find enough uniqueness and value in ohmTown that you go and visit there and then return. And also, the whole point of even ohmTown was to get real-time conversation going on Twitch. So feel free to ask questions. In fact, I even have a space up there to pull people from the viewer base into the conversation in real time, if you are oh so motivated. With that in mind, let's get on with this little show. So what I do is I take a sample of news from ohmTown throughout the day. And that first article that I'm going to show you is rescuers formed a human chain to save people dangling from collapsed bridge. So apparently what happened was a bridge in Pennsylvania collapsed as President Joe Biden was supposed to go up and visit. And it kind of drew home the point that we need to spend more on infrastructure to repair and maintain what is already in place, lest things like this happen again and again. And the world is a dynamic place, and it swells and compresses, and things shift, and as time goes on, it degrades. And the next thing you know, without any monitoring or updating, you end up with cracks and maybe something falling. And unfortunately, people get hurt and things are damaged. And at least humans were being bros and helping each other out. to save some people from harm. Apparently, this bridge had been listed as poor condition for a decade, according to this article. And so what I do is I talk a little bit about it and go to the link that is embedded in each submission into ohmTown.com. This is a little snippet, and Vice articles are usually quite expansive. So this is the article. It has some pictures on it. It was put together by Paul Blessed on the 28th today. And so you can actually see in the picture that it's kind of just laid down on the ground. That bridge just kind of toppled over. And it was known to be possibly failing. And sure enough, it lived up to that examination from a decade ago. Eventually, it's going to collapse without maintenance. And what I don't do is read everything and then go into great detail. I want you to go and read the Vice.com article and then come back and talk. Give me your perspective and anybody else who might be listening or watching. Let's talk about it. Because a lot of people might just skim it or just read the headline and assess from there. But I end up reading it at a later time because I'm more interested in having an immediate reaction based on the title and the snippet and what I skim through the article. And then we can have a conversation in real time, either right now or tomorrow, because I'll be here tomorrow at 6:00 Eastern for an hour talking about the various articles that I select tomorrow. And I can run long should people want to have a longer conversation. And again, just so everybody knows, I've only been doing this live for the last 28 days. I hadn't started doing this full time, or I should say as a regular thing until the first of the year. Eventually I'll play games and stuff like that too, but I want to talk about the news, even in little bits. So if it would have occurred an hour later, this is a road that gets probably about 15,000 cars on it in a day. And if it was rush hour, we'd be looking at a couple hundred cars down in the valley. Yep. It just happened to be the right time for a fewer number of people to be hurt and property to be damaged. So kind of be happy that it was limited, right? But it really shouldn't have happened. Not when there's foreknowledge of it. So this next article is housed in Smack Talk. That is a group and a forum, a discussion board that focuses on Apple products and or its competitors, as long as there's Apple somewhere involved in the discussion. And in this particular instance, it's a stock related news article. Morgan Stanley bumps Apple price target to 210 on record breaking Q1 22 sales. So click the link, you get taken over to Apple Insider. And what you'll find out is that people have been purchasing technology, and I can't imagine why. You're no longer driving as much. You're no longer spending money on going out as much. For the last 2 years, people have basically been idle. And so the spending has increased on tech that makes things more accessible. And when you find out, my tech is aging, you want to bump it up to something newer. So people start buying. And one of the quotes within the article, and this article is written by Mike Peterson. Wonder if it's the Mike Peterson I knew. According to Huberty, the Blockbuster earnings results will likely refocus investors on the stability and longevity of Apple's growing user base. Well, hopefully that holds true. Apple products are pretty drop dead simple, relatively more secure, and they hold their value. Although I think now trade-in prices have, I think they've steadily decreased with time. I remember a time when the value of my Apple products would have maintained for a longer period of time, and now it seems like they drop a lot faster. But that might just be an anecdotal observation and not the, research doesn't bear it out, but I think that might be true. I would be happy if somebody does some homework and comes back and talks to me about it. If I am wrong, then I will surely do a course correction. I can look it up as well, but we'll have to come back and revisit it. So go over to Apple Insider and read that article and let me know what you think. Apple right now is at 170. So if the target is 210, then it will continue to increase. Although earlier today it was at 165, dipped down to closer to 160, I guess, at one point. But it is up 11 per share for the day. This next article is the Daily News Show. Living near fracking sites linked to higher risk of early death, says a study. Harvard researchers provide further evidence that, as one environmental advocate has said, fracking is inherently hazardous to the health and safety of people and communities in proximity to it. And I agree. I've seen video, and I haven't had empirical experience with it. This is an article by Kenny Stansel. Elderly individuals who live near or downwind of fracking and other unconventional drilling operations are at risk of early death compared with seniors who don't live in close proximity to such sites. And really it's because they're pumping stuff into the ground. It seeps into the groundwater. And anything really industrial that off gases anything into the atmosphere can lead, because it will drop out of suspension closer to its source than further away. And so Harvard Chan School acknowledged in its press release that it has found connections between UOGD activities, which is unconventional oil and gas development activities, and increased human exposure to harmful substances in both air and water, as well as connections between UOGD exposure and adverse prenatal, respiratory, cardiovascular, and carcinogenic health outcomes. So the more that we noodle around with chemicals that are industrial and not vetted for their particular use in the context of proximity to humans, you end up with contaminants. You end up with maybe ingesting it or inhaling it. And those who have a compromised immune system will suffer the most. Now, when it's used in the right way with the right checks and balances to make sure that there's no exposure that's harmful, then fine. I mean, some really horrible to human chemicals are used in the production of various everyday things, but because it's tempered with research, science, and some semblance of ethics that say we can't do this, some harms are not done. But we have history as human beings of pushing an agenda to make something happen. Cigarettes, for instance, were actually touted by doctors for a period of time, which to me, that's really absurd. The nonstick coating on pans in their early creation of nonstick coatings were horrible for humans because it was actually chipping off. People were consuming it. Women who were pregnant had either miscarriages or deformed children. It was just a horrible thing to bear witness to. And there's documentaries about it. And over time, regulation has been leveraged against these companies. Obviously, follow the money, and where the money goes, that's where a lot of the messaging comes from. Because when somebody spends $10 million on messaging, whereas researchers publish reports and then it's arguably seen by journalists, it's a whole lot louder coming from somebody that's spending, $10 million. And as I regularly will be saying, that abuse happens in the dark. So you don't hear somebody running around saying that they're happy to abuse you. No, they silence anybody who talks about it. And you end up having to look back and say, oh, you were right 15 years ago. Sorry about minimizing what you were talking about. So, take a look at fracking in your area and come back and let me know what you think. This next article is the world's first molecular beverage printer raises $30 million to produce, quote unquote, infinite amount of drinks. If you thought beverage companies releasing NFTs was the extent of beverages of the future, hold on to your hat. So this article comes from VinePair. It's written by Julia Larson, who's pretty prolific on that site. After 4 years of working on the prototype, Canna Technology has secured funding to bring their molecular beverage printer to market following a $30 million investment from the Venture Foundry. That's an interesting turn of phrase. The production board, Venture Foundry. So both Canna and TBP are emphasizing the environmental benefits of the printer, purporting how it will solve many of the drawbacks of the beverage industry, including relying on industrialized agriculture, water, and material waste, and excessive transportation. So let's see. First molecular beverage printer to bring the beverage aisle to your countertop, says its website. So that'll be interesting to go and look into more. Any beverage, anytime, greater convenience, and most importantly, dramatically less environmental impact. The Netflix of beverage experiences. So this will be very interesting to follow. What do you think of that? It's the replicator of the 21st century. It can actually make drinks. We know we can print an infinite number of beverages from a few core flavor compounds. Wow. So if this thing can mix and match and produce a drink, you're basically going to be buying the component elements. I'm not sure how molecular beverage printer is the right turn of phrase for it, but let's look into it, and then we can come back tomorrow and talk about it, if you so choose. That'd be great. Okay, so that's over at VinePair. So this next article is on Mobble. Obviously, there are moments where we turn political. This is actually turning into a real world event beyond just political discourse. If Russia invades, the Biden administration plans to hit Russian banks harder than ever before. So this is what happened during the Cold War. Essentially, there was enough financial capability, power, influence by the United States that Russia was shut down in its efforts to maintain the USSR. And eventually it collapsed and was balkanized. There are a bunch of different countries now that used to make up what amounted to the Russian version of the United States. Although I don't know how, I don't know how individually they were. I'd have to look into it again because it's been a while. But they were largely self-directed and just fed information back. And then when they were balkanized, it was essentially tribal again, right? So there was a lot of infighting, civil war within the various regions, everybody fighting for control, and it was just a really bad time, I guess you could say, without getting too pithy about the phrases. I knew people from the region. They were in the United States, trying to get away from that. And it was described as being a really bad experience. So my concern here is, the United States during coronavirus is having a bad time in general. So let's see. State media showing the trading floor at the headquarters of Sberbank in Moscow in 2019. So the U.S. is making plans for sanctions on Russia. My concern is that China and Russia are very well tied together in their ideologies, which is to try and hobble the United States. And it hasn't been as overt from China in every context. But China is very much stay out of our business. Well, we have these disruptions in our supply chain, most of them tied to external production being brought domestically, and then bottlenecks within our domestic infrastructure. All China has to do is maintain this slow flow. And since most business, let me rephrase that, a lot of business is controlled by the state, maybe there is influence there. I don't know for sure. There would be no way to verify something like that. But it's not hard to imagine that China and Russia would side with each other to hobble the U.S. influence, particularly in Ukraine. And Ukraine is fed power by Russian gas lines. So they could easily turn off the power basically to Ukraine. And without getting too into it, because I'm not a subject matter expert on Ukrainian or Russian geopolitics, this observation is simply that. I suspect that there is more to it than just the U.S. being able to influence the Russian banking system without getting hit by those who are on the side of the Russian government. And there's a whole lot more to that. Obviously, when you peel back the layers of geopolitics, you will eventually find more context that influences these observations. So if you know of something, if you are interested in talking about it, feel free to throw it in chat. I don't tend to stay long with the discussions of politics, But in this particular case, it's more about influencing the economic system, shutting down the aggression in Ukraine, and letting Ukraine have its independence, build its democracy, be a stable footprint, maybe, right? We never know. There's a lot of conflict around the world, yeah, where military takes power and controls with an iron fist, which isn't so much the case in the United States. I say so much, but it's just not the case. At any rate, let's keep on moving down this line of news. So this next article is head of WhatsApp on releasing an iPad app. Yes, it is somewhat scatterbrained with the way that I present the news. There's a whole bunch of news, and it is a progression of what was set out at various times throughout the day. This particular article is over at The Verge, and it's housed within the Word in Tech group on ohmTown.com. But if you click the link, visit the source, you'll get taken to The Verge. So I encourage you to go over there. It's an article written by Alex Heath. And the WhatsApp chief has a message for those who have been clamoring for a native iPad app. Don't give up hope. Well, I don't use WhatsApp. I know it exists. I probably have an account on it of one flavor or another. Oh, I have a little tidbit of news. I don't have an article on it or anything, but it was something that I was informed of today. That Apple is basically killing it, not Apple, Google is killing its Google app service that used to be free for the last 12 years. So if you have the free service because you were grandfathered over, they're killing it. And so those free services are going to go away, and you're going to have to pay per account for any of the services that you have been using. In fact, they're going to transfer you over at the end of March. And if you don't have a credit card on file to pay for it, the services will stop. And I'm one of those on at least 3 domains. And so I will end up having to pay, quite a bit to keep on using the services, which is it's just a change, but a change that really wasn't expected to come. Anyway, that has nothing to do with this, but I practice associative thinking. So this triggered something in my head that made me want to talk about that. So that's just how things are here. Anyway, an app on the iPad for WhatsApp gives much more real estate for somebody to create and to interact with. So I'm always a fan of having a universal app that can be used anywhere. And if you do it the first time, then you don't have to worry about ever evolving your product again and again, or have a separate app. But you can create universal apps that will span, if you include it all in the programming the first time, the watch and the iPhone and the iPad and desktop. Yeah, it's still a lot of work, but programming wise, business wise, I understand why you would want to create a minimum viable product and get it out there so that you can start getting users, people using the service itself. So we shall see what happens, but WhatsApp is tied to Facebook, now Meta, and I really don't do anything on Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp. It's just not my thing. So at any rate, a WhatsApp app is going to come to iPad, hopefully soon, for those who are really interested in that. And this next one is Of the Bean. It's the order of the bean, but it just goes by Of the Bean. because you can be a member of the bean or a brother of the bean or sisterhood of the bean, whatever you want to call it, but it's the order of the bean. And it all is about coffee, products and services and people and personalities and the ecosystem, the culture, basically everything about coffee. This is introducing the Steadfast Coffee Brewer from Nothing Coffee founder, Yoonjun Kim, I believe is the pronunciation. I might be pronouncing it wrong. So if you know, correct me phonetically in chat. Click the button. You go over to sprudge.com. This is an article by, let's see, maybe it's at the very bottom, which I'm never a big fan of. Nope, I don't see it anywhere. I guess it's just, it's a review by In Sung Jung. And this is what it looks like. Pardon for the scrolling. If it makes your eyes cross, I apologize. So this is what it looks like, apparently. Coffee brewer, huh? You just set it on your coffee maker or on your mug and pour your water into it with the grounds and it'll filter out. I know a few people that use this type of coffee filter and mechanism for brewing coffee. I like espresso machines and just mash a couple buttons once they're dialed in and you get the exact coffee the way you want it pretty darn near every time. But there you have it. Minimalist, nice design, looks simple enough. Go and check it out. It's over at sprudge.com if you want to read more about it. This next article, pardon me 1 second, just want to make sure I'm on the right page. This next article is housed within Wanted, which is a more focused tech product, really, group where it's more extreme. It's more about things that people would want, but not necessarily afford easily. And I had just given a presentation yesterday, as a matter of fact, on hard drives, basically telling everybody don't bother with hard drives, mechanical drives, right? Mechanical drives are, they're inexpensive for what you get, but they are very susceptible to shock and other environmentals. They're harder, well, depending on what happens, the forensics of them is easier, but the recovery of data is hard. And really, you never know when they might fail. Solid state drives are less impacted by various environmental concerns, I should say. They're much more shock resistant, all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's almost a known reliability level for solid state drives or M.2 drives versus mechanical hard drives. So, and the speed is just dramatically different between M.2 and mechanical drives, and even M.2 and SSDs. But I understand that mechanical hard drives have a storage capability that is dramatically larger. So these are 22 terabyte drives. The largest drives that I use are 10. 10 terabytes is good, but if you are doing a storage array, you need bigger. So an array of 22 terabyte drives would keep me in storage for 10 years, I'd say. Well, it depends on how many times how many times I store stuff, because each one of these shows is somewhere around 3 gigs. And so you can consume quite a bit if you're doing this every day for multiple hours. And people who do it for 8 hours a day are looking at, 24 gigs of storage before editing. And then once you edit it, you have to keep your raw footage. Otherwise, if something happens to your edited footage, you have no source material to fall back on, which can be a bummer. But at any rate, Seagate is shipping it to some customers. So you'll probably have to be pretty special. This is over at Ars Technica. I didn't look up the price. I'm not sure what it is. Sometimes they give you an idea. So the highest capacity drives most people can currently buy top out at 20 terabytes. The Seagate Iron Wolf Pro or Western Digital Gold are 2 drives, and they're generally retailing for $600. I would probably think that either that will decline when production rates and delivery times decline, but with everybody shifting to more online and technology being consumed across the board at a faster rate than prior to March of 2020, I can imagine that pricing is going to be either increasing or at stasis. Expect to spend over $600. We'll see once they announce the pricing. It's not announced here. So 100 terabyte drives by 2030 would be amazing. I still am resistant to any mechanical drive. If you can, get a motherboard that supports NVMe. M.2s, not NVMe SSDs. Get M.2s and boot to that, and then use SSD as storage in coordination with the M.2, and then add mechanical disks for just bulk storage media that isn't going to be used all the time. Because the more you use the the more you use any storage, the faster it's going to degrade and fail. But mechanical drives are always spinning somewhere between 5,000 RPM and 10,000 or more, depending on what you're buying. So, and the more that M.2s and SSDs are used, the more dedication there will be to those productions and those research types. And we move away from mechanical drives. And that's when the big change will come. Much cheaper, much larger, much faster drives, solid state drives. Under Law Nerd, this is related to lawyers, really. Elite firm makes major money moves, offering starting salaries of $225,000. Some 15 years ago, it was half that. But I've kind of noticed that it seems like every 10 to 15 years, a zero is added to the valuation of companies and salaries double. It's almost like, the idea of the number of transistors doubling every 2 years. It's kind of like that to me. Again, it might be anecdotal. Well, it's anecdotal. I have no verification of my statement there, but it just seems like some salaries are increasing, while others are remaining stagnant. And it's really all about supply and demand and people wanting highly skilled human resources within their enterprise. And when it comes to elite firms, they are making the money necessary to compensate adequately. So ever since Milbank started the latest round of salary wars just last week, which was an article that had been aggregated into ohmTown, probably from above the law. Now others are. So a first year is making $225,000, but they have to be pretty hot. you're not going to get out of law school barely inching by. You had better be pretty damn good at the legal profession when you pass the bar, get your license, and start practicing. So I guess you never know. On top of that, the firm's clerkship bonus is an astonishing $140,000. So if you're thinking about making a move, wow. Double and lunar bonus typically beat Big Law's market scale bonuses by multiples, sometimes rising to amounts as high as $700,000. Wow. Interesting. A California litigation boutique that specializes in plaintiff side litigation on a contingency fee basis. So just know, though, that if you're going to be going into law school and you're going to, which for a good law school, you're looking at $150,000 or more. And then when you get out and you're working for a law firm, you're looking at 2,000 plus hours a year, which is pretty standard employment, full-time employment, about 2,000 hours. You will be working beyond that, particularly on contingency. You have to hustle and win to get those bonuses, but people do it. So good luck to anybody who is striving for that. This next article is of the brew, 10 medal winning recipes from the National Homebrew Competition, which is something that I had spoken of in a previous episode. This article, oh wow, I grabbed a lot. Anyway, so if you visit the source, it's homebrewersassociation.org. And the article is, let's see, does it say who it's written by? Let me scroll down real quick and see. Nope, it's not. Doesn't list it. Well, anyway, I typically aggregate, like I've been saying, just a little bit of an article, not the whole thing. But if you are interested in it, then you can actually go and look. You have to become a member to look at the recipes, as far as I know. But these are all medal-winning beer recipes. And the group that this gets aggregated into is Of the Brew. So if you're a home brewer or if you're interested in beer, then this is one of the groups that you would be interested in looking at. And go check it out on ohmTown.com, and then click the link and go over to the source so that you can read the article there. Because you're not going to see everything on my site. You're going to see just a little snippet, because the whole idea is to talk briefly about it and motivate people to go and read the article. Consider it a form of you don't know what you don't know until somebody shows you what you don't know. And maybe you didn't know about that beer or that site. So go check it out. This next article is on Ban to Bezel on ohmTown. It was aggregated earlier today. Business News is the title. The Swiss watch industry just had its best year ever, with the U.S., it says the USA, leading the way. So every January, the Federation of Swiss Watch Industry, FH, publishes its figures for the previous year, broken down by markets, price, export value, and pretty much everything else you could imagine. And in this case, apparently the U.S. was leading the way. So this is an article over on Hodinkee. That's a nice watch. If you're watching the stream or you're watching the VOD, eventually I'm going to post these over on YouTube. I'm not sure how well received they will be, since I make a lot of references to Twitch. But hey. So let's see. Maybe it'll say how much. Now, the total export value of Swiss watches for 2021 was CHF 22.3 billion, beating the previous all-time record of 22.25 billion, which was set in 2014. And the United States was leading the market. Somehow we managed to absorb 3.1 billion in Swiss watches. That is a ton of money on watches. But it really depends. I mean, there's a lot. No, it doesn't depend. It's a lot of money, which represents a 55% increase over 2020. Wow. So this is an article by Jack Forster on Hodinkee. Don't just stop at what I'm saying. I really want you guys to go over to the site, read the whole thing. Watch designs are fascinating and beautiful creatures, and at ranging in price from $20 all the way up to hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, depending on the quality and the couture nature of it. And you basically have something that can pass down for generation after generation. Their Rolex, for instance, are typically referred to as heirloom watches. Parents give them to their kids. So go and check it out. I think you'll dig it. So this next article is housed in the Reality Hacker group. Go check it out. It's called the little snooze. My goodness, the little news bit. The title is VR's most popular game is mixing up its formula with new blocks and mechanics. Now, when I first saw this headline, I figured that it was going to be something like Minecraft VR or some racing game, but it's Beat Saber. And I guess it's adding more things to it. And I'll draw some attention to a game that I tried out in VR, which I really dig. It's kind of like Beat Saber, but entirely not, I guess, right? It uses blocks, but it's called Sucker Punch. It was an awesome game. I actually ended up selling my VR kit because I don't like cables. I've mentioned this in other VODs that in other shows. I really don't like cables. And so I got rid of my VR gear and will revisit it as soon as I can find something that I like that isn't tethered to a computer, at least tethered by cables. I don't mind wireless. If I could get, or I should say, if developers would develop it so that HDMI is broadcast to the headset with minimal lag, and the distance between the transmitter and the receiver on a VR headset would be minimal, maximum 8 feet in somebody's room. Then I would just go all hog on VR, but until that cable can be disappeared and it's not tied to something like PSVR is great, but it's tied to the PlayStation. Everything that's coming out of Facebook, now Meta, they're trying to distance themselves, right? Kind of like what Google did with Alphabet. Anything tied to that service, to Facebook and its infrastructure, I'm not interested in it. I want a standalone device. Like my stuff was tied to Steam, and even that made me flinch, not because of Steam and not because of Facebook proper, but because I don't want something to happen with a service and suddenly I can't use my device. And that's just how I am. You don't have to be that way. But I certainly don't want everything that I'm doing always tied into a service somewhere, where, I sneeze around my headset and something starts advertising Kleenex. I just don't like being that integrated. So at any rate, if you're into Beat Saber, they're going to be changing things up, I guess. And it's a fun game. And if you are sedentary, you don't really work out a lot, playing VR games really does get you up and moving, gives you an aerobic workout depending on what it is that you're playing. And Beat Saber really gets you swinging your arms around, and that's without a doubt. So burst sliders and other things, diagonal dots. Yeah, that'll be fun. So go check it out. It's Road to VR. I'm a big fan of VR. I've done fundamental research in it, in terms of using technology for fear, phobias. So fear management and pain management. And it's very, very powerful technology, and getting better because we are now able to make things hyper realistic. So this next article is housed in Mobile. That's where it's aggregated to, but the article's source is phys.org. And so when you click the link, it'll take you over there. And it's an article that it says by the European Space Agency, but there's got to be a human that wrote it. So somewhere in there, it might say it. This feature could easily be mistaken for a tree stump with characteristic concentric rings. It's actually an impressive bird's eye view of an ice-rich impact crater on Mars. So it looks like it shows the strata of, I'll click the link. It looks like it shows the strata, the layering, just like in the United States, just like on Earth. Weathering shows the strata of the manipulations of plate tectonics and folding of the rock and cooling and weathering, and it's really fascinating because you can actually look at the side of a cliff and count back the hundreds of thousands or millions of years, depending on the size of the cliff face. And to find it out over on Mars could lead to some fascinating results. So it's pretty neat to see it. And some of the things that we are seeing, it's fascinating that we are seeing them arguably in real time, right? There's a lag between video or commands being sent from the Earth to Mars and then the video coming back. I'm not sure how long it is, but to receive video and send directions from Earth and from Mars is just amazing to me. Amazing times you all live in. And I hope that things just keep getting better from where we are now. I think we need some wins, right, as a planet. So this next article is the continuity report on ohmTown.com. You can go to the group called the Continuity Report, which talks about movies. And Frankenstein writer Mary Shelley biopic, Mary's Monster, is in the works. And Fullwell 73 have teamed with Rose Pictures to co-produce a feature about Frankenstein author Mary Shelley. And this is an article over on Variety. Please go over to Variety and read the entirety of the article and then come back and talk to me. It's by KJ Yossman. I may be pronouncing that incorrectly, and I apologize. It'll be the biopic will be titled Mary's Monster, which is really fascinating because everybody thinks that Frankenstein is the name of the monster, but it's actually Frankenstein's monster. Anyway. 204-year-old book considered by experts to be the world's first science fiction novel, has inspired countless film, television, and theatrical adaptations. Titled Mary's Monster, it follows Shelley as she struggles to complete her Gothic masterpiece, which was published in 1818. Pretty amazing. And if you've never seen any of the works that were spawned from the book and you've never read the book, you should go and check it out and check out some movies about it. It was really an amazing book for its time. And this biopic will be enlightening because people will get a behind the scenes look at what really was documented and maybe not published overtly, right? So there's a lot of people that take notes and write letters and stuff like that, and it never gets published and it's hard to find. But when people do a deep dive into a subject and question things and go and dig around, they eventually find things that are enlightening as to why this got made the way it is and motivations and whatnot. So it'll be a fun watch, I'm sure. This next article is the Daily News Show article on ohmTown. Its source is commondreams.org, and I'm going to click the link. This is an article that's titled 320 plus scientists basically are saying suspend vaccine patents to prevent future variants. And the context is that patents are highly isolating in nature, right? So if you are, and I agree and I can't agree. There's a context for patents. And one of the problems here with a patent, and I understand their perspective, is that if you have a patent on something that can save millions of lives, nobody else can produce that product, right? It prevents for X number of years, and who knows if it'll change later on. But a patent prevents anybody else from producing the work. And if anybody has the means to defend it, pharmaceutical companies definitely have the means to defend a patent and to apply it globally. So in the EU, you can't just take something from the US, because the US patent system allows somebody in the US to extend their patent to the EU and get it in an EU patent. And then in the EU, they can defend that patent in any of the EU member states. Okay. So, and it applies elsewhere too. You just have to extend that patent, apply for a patent in a given country or a geographic region if they have agreements like that, like the EU has agreements. And it's all about trade agreements. So if I want to reproduce a vaccine that has a patent in it, if I do it in some other country that doesn't have patent protection, there might be other means, right? Geopolitical means to stop somebody from producing that vaccine. But anything that's produced in the United States can be cloned in China with a relative impunity. So here they say suspend vaccine patents to prevent future variants, right? Allowing huge numbers of people in low and middle income countries to remain unvaccinated is a reckless approach to public health. They say that because it's expensive to get a patented product because it is a constrained supplier. And if they open it up too much to manufacturing, then they can lose control of it. Somebody else can clone it. And basically, you end up losing control of your patent, and whatever it is that's patented, it starts getting copied all over the place. And you have to literally chase them down. You have to litigate to stop them from producing that vaccine. And while it will save millions of people, it will not produce revenue for the patented product and that company. So somebody has to pay for the vaccine. And really the only way that you can lower prices is to open it up to production by anybody anywhere, which invalidates a patent pretty much. Because you can't really claw it back. I mean, if somebody starts producing it, then it's out in the wild. So, and because it's a public health issue, I kind of agree with it. But the capitalist in me struggles with the idea of the state coming in and saying, well, we funded this with public money, so it has to go to everybody. But it was developed by private industry, but there were also others working on it. So it gets kind of muddy. And sometimes these technology agreements are, it's open for particular uses and closed for other uses. So you can't just give it out willy-nilly forever. There's an exclusivity agreement at some point where it becomes the product wholly of that company. But that's what technology exchange is and private-public partnerships. So it's really tough to just go all in on one side of the fence or the other. But saving lives, to me, is the humane thing society would do, right? You don't want people to just die because of a $250 shot. But when you're looking at $250 per shot and it's 7 billion people on the planet that need 3 of them, you're looking at a metric ton of money. And it's hard for hardcore capitalists to walk away from that. And I've had these conversations with people saying, I could care less if people think that I'm a complete butthole. I would rather have the money. Yeah. Some people are like that. And it's hard to completely disagree. At any rate, I'm going to end with this, and then I'm going to talk about something else that I had already spoke about yesterday, but this was too funny to pass up. So West Virginia, okay, this is in Marble, and the article is actually sourced by Vice.com. So go over to Vice.com and read the rest of this article, because I only have a snippet. I refuse to put the whole article. In fact, I'm going to be chopping this down even more so that it's less hosted on my site. I don't like all of this content on my site. But at any rate, go over to Vice.com and do a search for West Virginia governor flashed his dog's butthole before God and C-SPAN. So it says the governor of West Virginia flashed his dog's butthole at the camera during his State of the State address Thursday night in an apparent effort to tell off the state's haters like Bette Midler, following a wave of outrage directed at Senator Joe Manchin. Oh my God. Oh, there it is. Oh, I'm actually streaming that. It's an article written by Emma Ackerman. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And sure enough, I'm streaming that. That's just wonderful. Anyway, that's enough for that article. The next thing that I want to talk about, I'm just going to leave it alone, because there's nothing really else to say, Bette Midler referring to the state, West Virginia state, as poor, illiterate, and strung out. Oh, God. Yeah, that's kind of abrasive. You can't generalize the entirety of a state. Um, there might be some poor, there might be some illiterate, there might be some strung out, but that's every state. Um, it's so inflammatory, but you, you don't get change through moderation, it seems. I'm a moderate. I see value in almost everything from every perspective. Sometimes it's wildly outlandish and I can't agree with it in any way, um, unless there's some glimmer of common sense within the noise of absurdity and discourse like here on this channel. We might be able to find it, but sometimes people lean really hard into the absurdity and refuse to believe. It's not a matter of believe. There are facts, and facts are facts. There are no alternative facts. There are just facts. So, I don't agree with Bette Midler, throwing out this screed of poor, illiterate, and strung out West Virginia, because it's everywhere. There's a little bit of that everywhere. There's brilliant people in West Virginia as well. And a lot of it is all about opportunity to acquire the means so that you aren't poor, you aren't illiterate, and you're dealing with things. You are provided resources so that you can learn how to deal with things so that you don't end up strung out. So, too much ignorance coming from Bette Midler. Anyway, it's polarizing, it's hateful, it's marginalizing, it's absurd. So anyway, but then again, I don't necessarily agree with Mencken. So here we are talking about it here on Twitch. So we need moderation and civil discourse. But apparently that doesn't work. But I'm going to do my part. I will be the change I want to see in the world. Okay, so something that I talked about yesterday, I'm going to talk about it again. I have no connection to this Kickstarter or any of the companies or persons within this Kickstarter, but I am going to draw some attention to it. And I'm going to refresh to see what its current value is. So it's just a little bit off. And this number here, this 28,995 might change because there's a conversion taking place seemingly in real time. So when the euro to US dollar changes in valuation, so will this number. But they're trying to get to $29,000. The original was 26,000 euro. So it's a little bit off from the 26,000 euro. But this is a really fun game. I haven't played it myself. I've only watched it get played in real time, and I've watched the developer and publisher talk about it. And it's a Western-inspired survival base building game, but it has zombies. But its world generation is fascinating. And I was in the chat where I said that the developer should talk to the developers of Dorf Romantic, I think it's called. I own the game and I can't remember what it's called. Anyway, let me look real quick. I might as well. I'm running a little. Yeah, it's Dorf Romantic, which is basically a tile placing game. But in this, what you do is you build your base. Whoops, there's a whole bunch of modes of support, right? You can choose to pledge a different value. But what I want to show you here is, depending on the pledge that you make, you can play the pre-alpha, the alpha, the beta, and then you get the release version of it, as well as other perks for the level of pledge you make. But the way that the game works is you start out with a tile, and then as you approach the edge of the tile, you get to select which other tiles get placed. And there's a bunch of different tiles. And I'm sure that more will come as the developer continues developing the game. But what I saw was the alpha version of it. The resolution of the graphics, the style of the graphics, the animation, it's all a blast to look at. And so I'm hoping that this thing gains some attention and traction and blossoms into what I think it can be. And I hope that at some point they add multiplayer, because it's a single player game right now. And even opens up to being competitive, where you have to fight to keep your tiles from other people. Like tiles can be split off, and so you would have to fight to recover the tile to keep it all together. There's just so much here that I would love. And then I really want them to talk to Dorfromantic, because if they can merge together these ideas, they can make a massive board with multiple people all playing the game at the same time and placing tiles and competing for space. And it's kind of like an inverse battle royale, because with a battle royale, it starts out big and slowly compresses to small. But what I envision for this game would be it expands bigger and bigger, and you have to defend, and you're just you don't have a whole bunch of other stuff. You may be able to add things that slow down somebody else from taking over a tile, but it's really just an individual base management in a growing field. You gather resources, you earn enough resources to create a new tile, and you place the tile. It would just be so much fun to play. So we'll see what happens, but this particular game is called Above Snakes. The developer said that it's a euphemism basically for not being dead. I agree. It's a fun turn of phrase. It's unique. If you were to type in Above Snakes or a Western inspired base building game, you would probably find only this. So it's fun, and I really dig it. So go and check it out. You can get it for, I think, as little as $20 US, 19 right now, 19 US, or 17 euro. And because we live in a global economy, and money can exchange hands in a multitude of ways, and you don't have to go to a store to acquire it, you can pledge now, and in March when it releases, if you have the pre-alpha access, you can start playing this game in a month when this Kickstarter ends, which is in 21 days. And then they process stuff. Kickstarter and Amazon is the gateway, I believe, the billing gateway. And so once everything is processed, he'll have his money and open it up to pre-alpha pledges. So I think with that, I'm going to call it a night. And thank you for coming and watching the show. Feel free to throw something in chat if you have any questions or comments. My chat is typically, this channel's chat is typically open 24/7. So people can come in and leave notes whenever they want to, ask questions about something that they've seen in a VOD, or something that they have seen in ohmTown.com, and they can just copy and paste that URL so that I can review it and talk about it live on the show. And that's it. That's how it works. Got a bunch of news articles, and oops, I hit the wrong button. And that's it for today. So again, if you click that front page of ohmTown, you'll get taken to a whole group of new articles. Yay. Thanks for coming. I'm going to call it. See you tomorrow, 6 p.m. Eastern. Bye-bye.